It's funny how I talk the lowest of anyone in this room, and my microphone never works. Well, I basically, starting in New York and being very, very lucky to meet the Coen brothers and Marty Scorsese and Spike Lee, Jonathan Demme. Many great filmmakers were there and needed a person like me, and I worked as a dialogue editor for most of my early days, and then I sort of slipped into sound effects, or I kind of fell off the back of the bus into sound effects editing and design. And it was sort of a mixture of, like, people say, how did you get started? And I really felt like I just sort of followed the path of least resistance for a great part of my first career, which was in New York. And it was all about the Center Channel. Everything happened in the Center Channel on all of those films. And even the Coen brothers, who really understand sound editing and sound effects, and the effect of sound effects, are very Center Channel type people. Like, we don't put anything in the surrounds unless there's a really good reason. And that part of it, fortunately for all of us here, and for basically everyone in the film business, the Center Channel right now is pretty much where the action is. That's where all the talking is. And the drama is, of course, in film you can have all sorts of drama, but the drama that comes out of the actor's mouth is pretty much the one that people go to theaters and pay tickets for, I think. You could debate that, I suppose, but it's at least a pretty good reason to go see a movie. And even like Gravity, the director was insistent on a daily basis, on a minute-to-minute basis, that we not lose sight of the fact that it's a drama. It's about these actors and it's about these people. And a lot of that is related in the talking. And Gravity, actually, we did pan all the dialogue, so it's not quite the Center Channel idea, but it is about the idea that the audiences want to be part of a story. They want to understand what you're trying to say. And that drama usually comes from actors, and the long tradition in Hollywood is that that comes out of the Center Channel. I think that it's not fair, really, to nail down the dialogue, and certainly not the music, to the Center Channel. But it is, the Center Channel is more of a kind of metaphorical idea that it's the center, it's the focus of what's happening in the movie and where the story's being told. And I think that it's helpful to not actually literally think of it as Center Channel, and it is nice to be able to go off of the Center Channel with talking now and then, or in Gravity, where everything was removed basically from the Center Channel. And I wonder, Dennis, you probably feel the same way about the Center Channel. When the music is happening, you think it's the Center Channel for you and the composer.
Well, honestly, my feeling for music is I see the Center Channel, at least in terms of the film, almost reserved primarily for dialogue. And I actually spend a lot of time in mixes for music, trying to not interfere with the dialogue in a way. So for me, I have all the other monitors. I feel that I utilize a lot of stereo effects. I utilize the surrounds a lot. I like the surrounds. I like to fill the space, fill the room. And I think great music score does a really, really good job of that. And I see, and again, music, this is another way I look at music. Why is music even in a movie? It's really there to connect us emotionally to what's happening. It sort of has a unique purpose in that regard. And I think because of that, I think that the space that we use enhances that ability to essentially wrap the audience in the music. And I think of that a lot. Even in a 5-1 mode, I know we're here to discuss immersive sound, which of course is I feel a lot different. But 5.1 or 7.1, if I'm doing 5.1 or 7.1 mixes, I still utilize the surrounds quite a bit. And it's not, I don't put, obviously I'm not going to put drum tracks in the surrounds or anything that's going to distract, but I'm really trying to make the music enhance the movie. Be careful about dialogue. Be careful about certain instruments. Even if I'm recording, let's say I'm recording orchestra, a composer's got an oboe that's carrying a solo. An oboe is right in that perfect range with dialogue. And if it's too loud, if it's too prevalent, if it's stepping on dialogue, the music's going away. And so we'll talk, even if I hear we're doing the score, we'll do a take, less oboe, we make adjustments. I'm always aware of the dialogue, even in the record process. So, maybe it's a long-winded way of saying I actually try to stay away from the center channel, especially for important dialogue with music. Whether it's through, if I have the ability to pan stuff away, I'll do that. If in an immersive environment, I can position sound. It's one of the great things about the ability of this immersive environment. We have so much more control over sound and placement and all. Of course, we have to be careful of that as well. So there's a lot of aspects to it, but basically, for me, the center channel, I always think of it as committed to the dialogue, because at the end of the day, the dialogue's telling the story of the movie, and that's the key, the most important aspect. So I consider my job is, in a way, like I said, to enhance the scene, but be very, very careful of dialogue.
How about you, Ron? Within that idea, and I think we should drop the center channel idea and talk about more like focus. So if you have a multi-channel score, which pretty much all scores come to the stage as 5.1, 7.1, or something elaborate, how can you make a focus sound out of that and still spread it all around the room?
That's a good question, because the more you pull things off the screen and spread things out into the room, you are taking the focus away, like you're bringing stuff out, but the idea is to wrap, like Dennis was saying, you wrap the audience with sound and you fill up the theater without pulling your focus away from the front. And it's a good trick, because you take other sounds that are more constant, like strings or synth pads, things like that nature, can live back there and move around and do whatever, and they don't really draw attention, but they fill up the area and give you a sense of, wow, you're inside this and not just only in the front of the screen. A lot of times I take the orchestra and I spread it to the two, like in Atmos, the two that are right there on the wall. They're actually farther apart than just the left and right. So it actually gives more room for sound effects. It gives more room for dialogue. It gives you a little more space for clarity in certain tracks, so it gives you more depth. It puts you in a better space. And the one thing we always forget about a lot of these formats, especially in Atmos, is that all the surround speakers are full range. So when you pull something back there, it's just like the front. You're not getting a rolled off sound anymore. It doesn't get thinner or less fidelity. You're getting that full range. So automatically, right off the bat, just putting your 7.1 in that format, you get a better sound. So I love that fact about it. That was the first thing we noticed when we were doing Life of Pi. It was probably the second or third Atmos movie ever. And we really didn't know what it was going to be like. So we just started A-Bing stuff constantly. It's like, okay, what did our 7.1 sound like that we really loved? And then we put some stuff out there and A-B it, and like, wow, look how full that is. It's great, and we haven't even done anything yet. So it's fantastic for that. Pulling certain sounds out not only gives you a lot of depth, it also gains clarity, which we always are looking for with dialogue, especially in tough scenes when everything's crowding in there and everybody's jumping on the same spot, and you're trying to hear this one guy who's talking like this, like what, Mark Wahlberg. No offense, Mark. Oh, sorry, man. Yeah, that's just because I'm working on a Mark Wahlberg movie right now. But he's great, but there's a lot of actors that play down like that, and they're very intense, and it's a great effect. But if you have a lot of stuff exploding and doing all this stuff, you got to do something to clear that up. And you're right, Skip, people really want to hear the dialogue. I hear this #1 complaint from anybody. They're like, oh, you mix sound? How come I'm at home and I'm always doing this with a remote, right? It's because you got to hear that dialogue. So these formats actually lend themselves to giving us that depth and that clarity to be able to play scenes that way. So I found it as a great tool and a great atmospheric way to be more artistic and still get a little better clarity out of things. So you find that too?
Andy?
Yeah, it's interesting when you started off the discussion with the center channel. I mean, when I started mixing features in the 80s, it was only the center channel. So if you think of the formats that have changed, I mean, it started as a mono track. It became a stereo, a 3-track. Suddenly there was single surround, filtered, surround channel. And then it went to a stereo surround channel. Then it went to 7.1. So now we have 2 extra surround channels, and now we're into the immersive sound. So it's all grown from that center channel outwards, and that's the thing. It's our primary communication tool, really. It's a bit like I always think if you move dialogue around too much, it's a bit like reading a book and there's a page missing, or there's some. I mean, you've got to stay focused on the script. You've got to stay focused on the performances. I think my feeling about the immersive sound so far, and I've done 3 mixes in Atmos, 2 of them natively, the last one being the recent Planet of the Apes film, which the director was very, he really wanted to explore the possibilities. The previous film I'd done prior to that, they were very aware of the limited release cinemas currently that can show these formats. So they wanted to make absolutely certain that we were delivering a very confident 5.1 or a 7.1, which the beauty was we were able to switch back and forward very easily and assess that what we were going to deliver was going to work fine, and it did. With Apes, it was a little bit more. We spent a lot more time on the Atmos mix of that one because the director did want to become much more immersed in the environment, which is what we used it primarily for. As far as the dialogue goes, it hasn't, for me, it didn't really change the way I mix traditionally, which is pin it to the center, a little bit of movement if it's off-screen dialogue, but generally when it's something you're paying attention to, it doesn't really shift from the center. The music, which I really enjoyed playing with, the very first Atmos mix I did was actually one that Dennis prepared the music tracks, recorded and mixed the music tracks on. And he and I had a lot of discussion about how we were going to play this. And I talked to him about being cautious because I knew the producers were very anxious that we didn't create something that was exclusionary to a regular 5.1 release. And what Dennis provided from his studio down to mine matched really well. I just brought the sides down a little bit closer to the screen, probably just because of the different type of room that I have versus the room that Dennis mixes in. But it was very close and it played beautifully. I think a danger with the full range surrounds is that there's a tendency, I think, immediately to think you can pull things off the screen because now we can hear the clarity from the side speakers or the overhead speakers. But in fact, I experienced one time where we were pulling the music off of the screen a little bit too much, and I suddenly had this disconnected sense that we were playing the music with the film rather than in the film. And I think it was interesting to feel that and realize that just because you can doesn't always mean you should. And I think this is a learning tool for all of us at this point as to how we can explore this and utilize it and give the audience something a little bit special and a reason for them to go out to the movie theaters more, which is what we all want. And because this is going to be an experience that they can't get in their home. I mean, I know there are going to be home systems for sure, but I think the really big, powerful experience of going out to the movie theater is what we want to really give the audience. I felt personally when I saw Gravity that it was this extraordinary film with a great sound mix on it, but I thought it was a gift to the whole immersive sound world that this film suddenly, that was the way to go see that movie. There was no doubt about it, to try and go and see it in a great, well-equipped movie theater. And so I think that we're all learning this, but I think it's on all of us to handle it carefully and try and tailor the films that work best in that format to really push them and push the edge on it.
Thank you.
The thing that got me interested in immersive sound was for years we're fighting the center speaker with dialogue, music effects, Foley, group, and everything, and we found ourselves compressing it, EQing it, and making things go ahead and punch because we're fighting frequencies. And when I first started playing around with immersive sound, I found that, for example, a lot of the music is recorded in a decatry, left, center, right. And the ability in immersive sound, depending on the format, for example, I'll speak of what I know, which is Oro, the ability of having 6 speakers behind the screen, the ability to take that decatry and put it on the height speakers that frees up the center speaker so you still get the clarity of the music. At the same time, you're not fighting frequencies. The ability to put ambiances up high that you would find in real life, just the illusion of actually being outside, and once again, you're not fighting those speakers. So the thing that I found most interesting is clarity. I find that I hear things that I'm trying to achieve quicker, and I'm also finding that I'm not mixing as loud to get the sounds that I'm looking for. I'm able to tell the story in a manner that keeps people interested in it, yet hearing all the specifics, all the things that we try, the nuances that we try to mix. And that to me was very exciting. And regardless of the format, I think that the ability with these immersive formats is to hear the clarity. And just like we were saying, just because you can doesn't mean you have to. But then again, when you do pull something off the screen with full frequencies, bass managed surrounds, you don't hear the timbre change as it's coming off the screen like we used to before. And all of a sudden you can have things that are just very unique and smooth sounding. And that's what really excites me about going ahead and mixing this format. I think immersive sound to me it's all about storytelling. We're trying to get the emotions through in music. We're trying to all get everybody's little things together, but at the same time not fight it, so we have to over-brighten it, over-EQ it, over-compress it. And that, regardless of the format, I think that's one of the strengths of immersive sound. I had the fortunate chance to work with Dennis Sands, and we did Oz the Great and Powerful. And I brought Dennis over to my stage. We had the first immersive sound facility in Hollywood. And I brought Dennis over, and the first thing out of his mouth, and he'll tell you when I'm done with this, but he says, "Marty, we don't need another format here. We can't even get 5.1 to sound right." I said, "Dennis, just hold on." But Marty, we've been friends for a long time. I said, "Dennis, please sit down." But Marty, I said, "Dennis, please." So we sat down, and I played him the demo, and afterwards his eyes lit up, and he saw the opportunities, the chances, the things we could do. And I think it really was an eye-opener for him. And we had the chance on Oz the Great and Powerful to collaborate and talk about hanging room mics for the music. So Dennis, I don't want to take we, but Dennis here at Sony hung room mics for the height speakers so that when we were doing the 11.1, we had the sound editor, music editor, cut it for us so that we utilized it and had a special tracks on it so that we could add it in there. And it was a little simple thing where you tap it on and you tap it off and go, that's nice. Subtle, but it made a difference. And, it was just one of these things. And once again, it doesn't matter which the format is. It's the fact that we can do storytelling better, and we have clarity, and we don't have to beat people over the head with volume, with EQ and everything like that. It's all about being able to do our craft and letting everybody play together, but doing it in a manner that complements what's going on the screen. And to me, so much of the action is happening on the screen. We need to be able to have that clarity of the various speakers to be able to play what we're trying to accomplish. After you.
This is really terrific for us because where we live on the set is exactly what Marty's talking about. Storytelling is the central piece. It's not about hardware. It's about sustaining the illusion that these characters are existing in the duration of time that an audience sits and watches the movie. And from my end, for years, we've always captured, synchronously or otherwise, effects that are going on set, dialogue, ambiences, but it's always been in piecemeal basis, situational. In the last couple of films that I've done, it really started on Django, Wiley Stateman, who I've worked with a lot, and we started having this conversation about capturing more surround in the field, practical surround, as opposed to, everything being constructed after the fact. And of course, the primary focus for him and many of the people I'm in that conversation with is large crowds, environments, unique events, effects, if there are guns, explosions, that sort of thing. But we were talking about doing something more consistent and essentially sort of building a surround library that could, if needed, be there to be drawn on as the post-process moved forward. And we experimented a little bit there, but the last film I did is called Unfinished Business. It's coming out, I guess, early next year. We got very systematic about it, and it was essentially, in the field, you don't have a lot of time or a lot of space to collaborate to do that, and we were, what I ended up using was a DPA 5000 series 5.1 microphone in a simultaneous separate mini workstation, if you will, that was running synchronously when we were running our main mix and our main way of going, and built this up and kept a working log of the things that we couldn't get because the set's in motion or there was no control over the environment. And we picked up a stringer in Berlin in particular to go back to those specific environments and capture that specific information in surround form so that it could be applied. And Mandel is here somewhere, who is in the post team. Hey, Mandel. We just had a conversation today. He said they went back and that became a key player because everything was the real deal, and it meshed intrinsically without having to overwork the material to the scenes once they had been constructed and became whole pieces of cloth, because you don't always have that information in production. You're trying to make something that sells the illusion that each handmade shot is a continued reality, and then you hope, you hope and pray, and for me, part of that, the insurance about hoping and praying is being in a deep and meaningful conversation with my post-production partners in pre-production to try and have that conversation. Let's look through the script. Let's find things here that, even though it's on the page, make sense so that what Marty's talking about can occur. And I've just, there was times where we couldn't do that because it was just too much material and it would overload the post-process in terms of time and money. And now that's changed. Now it's doable. It's no big deal. You can have, what was it, 1,000 tracks are possible, and it's irrelevant.
We had 1,200 on Oz.
Yeah, it's hammers and nails. It's really what's going on in the movie. Where are we with these characters? What's going on emotionally? And so as part of my process, this is a big change to be able to go and be measured and designed and have a strategy in play with my partners about that process during production when it's most available, instead of trying to go back, So I love hearing this because I think it's bringing us closer together, the production and post-production team.
Speaking of that, we're in the business of communication, and the worst communication is in this business. We don't talk, especially production and a dialogue re-recording mixer. And if in an ideal world, it would be nice if post supervisors came to us early on and said, this is the team that's going to be mixing your picture, and let's all talk together. But that's unfortunately not reality. So any way that we can communicate, for example, what I mentioned before with Dennis Sands and talking about how he's going to approach recording the music and things like that, I think are essential, regardless of the format. It's communication, and I'm excited about things like that, to be able to talk to people and find out how much you have in common, and then other things that you may not have ever thought of, but just getting that communication going, because we all aspire to do the very best we can in the tight time frame and everything like that. And I've had the fortunate part of actually mixing with all the gentlemen to my right here on each different project here. Dennis, obviously, with Oz. Ron, we did the oral mix of Ender's Game, which was outstanding. And Andy, we did Rise of the Guardians. So the neat thing is I get to see how these other guys mix and the approaches they take. And everybody's different in what they do. And it's not about how much is immersive. It's about where and when and choose your battles. And there's just certain things that, styles that people have too. As consumers, a lot of time it's like, why isn't there more in the surrounds? And you have to realize is that you're on the stage with the director, producers. It's a collaborative effort. And it's also about storytelling, and you want to do what's appropriate at the time, not because we can, because it's appropriate. And it's just fun to see these guys and see the work that they did and how we would apply it to an immersive mix and everything. To me, it's one of those things you sit back and go, wow, very cool, very neat. And to sit back and see how others do it, to me, it's very exciting.
Dennis?
Over to you.
Sorry. Are any of those stories that Marty told true?
Actually they are. I was about as cynical as you could possibly be when it came to immersive sound. What had happened, I'll give you a little backstory. Director says to me, we were talking about doing Oz, and he says, we're going to do this. Now, this is, a couple of years ago, I guess, right? We're going to release this movie in these immersive sound things. He says, I want you to record some stuff for that. Honestly, I'd never heard it. I didn't know much about it. Frankly, I was cynical. I thought it was a big annoyance, but he's the director, and
You're cynical?
we're in the yes business, so I'm going, okay. And he says, we set up this demonstration. They're gonna play us some movie, and we're gonna go, and I'd like you to go to this demonstration. So the first one was at Marty's studio, and I walk in, sit down next to Marty, and literally I tell him, Marty, I lean over, this is really a pain in the ass. I don't want to be here. I've driven in, a long way. It's early in the morning. Oh man, and literally I said to him, you can't even get 5-1 straight in theaters. What are we doing this? What is this about? He said, just listen. And as he told you what happened, he played this stuff, and I'd never heard a movie sound like that. I was completely blown away. And I've been doing this a while, and I was really impressed. Not just the clarity, the depth, and it wasn't loud, it wasn't assaultive, it wasn't any of that. It was a different experience. It was a completely unique sound experience that I had never experienced ever before. Now, it certainly was a compliment to Marty and the guys and everything else, and everyone who worked on the movie. But just that, it was so impressive to me. I said, I want to do this. I want to play in this sandbox. This is really cool. And of course, a couple things. I didn't know what I was doing, and I honestly had no real way of hearing it from the music mixing standpoint. And it's very A, difficult, B, expensive to mix music on a dub stage. And also, I might add, very difficult, because dub stages are really not set up to do film music mixes. And so I had the bright idea of, I want to put this in my studio. I have a wonderful studio up in Santa Barbara where I live. And so I did, and it was the first time I could actually participate in this immersive sound. And it's an incredible thing. But here's something I discovered, and it's something for you guys to be, when I first did it, I was putting stuff all over the place. And it was really stupid. And it was one of those, I can, but why am I even doing it? It was ridiculous. And then, and the more I got into it, I discovered something really, really interesting. On really lyrical pieces of music, a lot of strings, let's say, very romantic pieces, the image can come off of the screen pretty comfortably. But if you have muscle music, you have big, powerful, strong music, you don't want to let go of the screen channels. Those big cabinets are really meaningful. especially on big, powerful, driving music. If you start to come off of that, you give that up. And that's a real danger. Now you're seriously affecting the impact that the music is giving you. So one of the benefits of being able to do an immersive sound film music mix from the raw elements is that I can actually control that. I can keep a lot of the image on those screen channels. I can use the power of those cabinets, but still fill the space with, not in a stupid way, which I had done initially, but in an creative, artistic way, so that I'm filling space, but I still keep the power of the cabinet. So that's something always, I've discovered that depending on the score, sometimes you can come off the screen and sometimes you can't. Because at the end of the day, just like we always want to keep track of the dialogue, the story, with the score, we want to keep in mind, what does a composer have in mind? What's the composer trying to do? The composer and director spend a lot of time, sometimes confrontationally, getting to the place where I'm involved. There's a long history, oftentimes, ahead of that point where they've just tried to figure out what the heck what's the music going to be, all that stuff. So, I want to be there to help. I'm not, just because I can do stuff doesn't mean I should.
Can I ask a quick question? How does it change the deliverables for somebody naive? I'll ask the dummy question here. How does it change what you deliver to the stage, and how does it change what you guys receive and work around?
In terms of,
terms of
the mixes,
yeah,
specifically
you
for,
deliver and what they're receiving. Yeah.
Okay, for oral, for the oral product, I'm doing 5/1 mixes with the understanding that, okay, these are going to be stems that are going to be moved, placed, raised, whatever. For an Atmos mix, I create objects, and then we'll have a conversation. I'll have a conversation. So, for example, the show that Andy and I worked on, we had actually a number of conversations where you have to decide, the Atmos system is an object-based system, so you have 118 dynamic objects. Those are objects that can be moved around or placed or whatever. That's for everybody. So dialogue effects music has to divide up those 118 dynamic objects amongst each other.
So, guess who gets the most?
Not us.
Not us.
Skip.
I didn't punch no doggy. I'm new to this.
So, and then I deliver a Pro Tools mix session with both the bed channels and the object channels that we've all agreed on. And that's what I deliver.
And I think on the film we did together, if I remember rightly, it was the bed track was a standard 7/1 maybe.
It's a 7/1
plus
stereo
7/1.
overheads.
And then the objects, I think it was 6 stereo pairs that you gave me, I
think
believe.
so. Yeah.
And what Dennis had done is in his room, he had positioned them through the Atmos channels so they would play in a certain position in the room. And then I imported his automation onto the Neve console, which would just do one run through of the reel, and all of his automation goes straight into the Neve, and then I have exactly the control of the panning I need for those objects. And that's why I was able to then listen to it, assess, once I'd put the dialogue and the sound effects in, whether the positioning that Dennis had given me was exactly going to work for that inside that film. And in fact, it did work very well indeed. I just compressed it very slightly back towards the screen because I think it was just the difference of the room that it was done in combined with the fact that now I had all the other elements of the film soundtrack to play with. But I mean, the process worked flawlessly because the automation just fed straight into between the Pro Tools automation into the Neve automation was fantastic. And in fact, when I did Apes, we used a similar thing with the Ape vocals where they had actually been pre-panned in Pro Tools. Prior to me getting them, I decided, the decision was made on that film that as well as taking the human dialogue, I would take the principal 8 dialogue as well, because they were key players in the film as much as the humans, in fact more so in many ways. And but because of the nature of their vocals, there was the desire that could be moved around the screen, unlike the human dialogue, and in fact moved around the room. And so again, I imported the automation that was prepared, and we put it straight in, and again, it worked really well. The disadvantage in a conventional mixing board, as opposed to doing it inside the Pro Tools, was that when I wanted to shift one of the vocals slightly differently in panning, I had to do it in real time, which is much tougher than doing it offline in a Pro Tools, because obviously within a frame, you could move one vocal from a side screen to the center screen, whereas I had to do it in the old-fashioned way, if you like, which took a little longer, but I've been doing it for a long time, so I got around it. But it was great, and so in that way, it was kind of interesting to see how that worked for dialogue, because I'd only experienced that with Dennis's music up to that point. But it's, as I said, it's a learning curve for all of us, and it's a lot of fun to play with, that's for sure.
It's come a long way, because at first we didn't have Atmos in our room where we're dubbing, so we dubbed in 7.1, and then we had to move to the Zanuck Theater and take all of our tracks over there and play it through a Pro Tools, repan everything in Atmos. So it was a lot less, clunky, not very slick, but we figured out a way to do it because it was brand new and we're just trying something out. So I actually split out all my stems into a whole bunch of stems. It was maybe 6 or 7 music stems in 7.1, and then we had a whole bunch of sound effects. I don't even know how many they did. And a few dialogue. I actually moved a couple of lines in dialogue, but not much on that film. But we took it to the Zanuck Theater and then repanned it in Atmos through the Pro Tools, and that's how we could do it. But now it's come a long way, and we're doing Atmos mixes native right in the console, and now the next step is having Dennis do stuff where he really has all the control and can do things and spend the time, and he knows the tracks even way better than we do, and can do those creatively, give it to us, and so the workflow's changed a lot over the last year or two. So it's getting better and better, and it's come to the point where we can really spend the time creatively and not worry about the gear, which is another big issue. But a lot of times we spend more time in the deliverables than we do on the final mix, which is insane. It's like you want to be mixing and spending your time creatively, and then you end up doing 2 weeks of formats afterwards. And a lot of people don't understand, like, okay, we're going to do an Atmos mix. We've already done the 7.1. We're going to do the Atmos now. It's like, okay, well, you get a day. Like, no, you can't do that in a day. It doesn't work. Or the opposite, you've done it natively in Atmos, and, oh, quick, make a 7.1, you just push a button. It's close, but, there's things that you want to change because it really changes the balances. It's not just a button push where you say, okay, it's perfect. Once you move things in different formats, it changes the balances. So you really have to be aware of that, and you spend the right amount of time to do them properly. So deliverables are a much bigger deal these days.
Your experience too, Skip? Let's let Skip talk.
So I have to talk. There's one thing about that we've all been touching on this basic idea that Atmos and Aura are about panning. But there is also another variety of this where Atmos and these multi-channel systems become if you look at it from a more static viewpoint, it's a much bigger, much more robust playback system. If you don't do any panning, or if the material that you have already has, like for instance, Mark, you're talking about recording in 5.1 on location. So if you then take that 5.1 recording and just distribute it around the room, you're going to create this 5.1 ambience, which has a lot of intrinsic, very sophisticated information that you can decode in your head. You don't have to do anything else to it. All you have to do is play it. It's the same thing as a beautiful stereo recording. There's tons of front, side, back, up, down information in the stereo recording. You don't have to do anything to it. Just play it back properly and accurately. that's another aspect to this multi-channel new frontier, which is fortunately easy for us to do. We don't even have to be careful. We just simply have to play the stuff back the way it was intended, stuff that we get from Mark or from Dennis. One of the great things, one of the great luxuries about re-recording beautifully recorded multi-channel material is it sounds so fantastic without doing anything at all to it. Make it a little louder or lower.
I think, yeah, you know, that's part of the hope. You know, in the field, you're thinking in terms of this being, you know, experienced. You know, and it's always, you can always not use it. You can always change it. You can always modify, but you want that initial. You want to lay the bed at least in a coherent way, so that whose hands are on it later can make it function. I mean, that's the whole point. So what you're saying is, you know, that's the fact that it's not a big deal to be able to use that kind of field-acquired, you know, material, just really expands the possibility of us doing that more and not having it perceived as, you know, inundating you with material that's overwhelming and clogging the system, but in fact is supporting what you're trying to do, you know. We love it. I mean, I think it's a great thing.
Let's start with Skip then, if I could ask a question. What is the biggest thing you learned throughout the process of Gravity, say, or such? What was the biggest thing you learned about working in the format, whether it's deliverables, whether it's, were you surprised that you're used to the surrounds? I mean, what did you learn as you went along?
Well, when we started that mix in England in the winter of 2012, the tools that we wanted to use weren't really ready yet, so we had a long lead. We finished in November and December, and the movie wasn't coming out until October. So we all jointly decided, well, let's just wait until the summer of 2013. And most of all, we wanted the panning tools, because Gravity is all about panning. Everything is panned. Nothing is static in the movie. And we all, our main wish was to preserve what we had and to be able to port that over to this new format and not have to redo all the panning was something that we felt was worth waiting for. And so 6 months later in Burbank, California, we did the Atmos mix, and we were able to basically capture all of the panning information from the original mix, which was all done virtually in Pro Tools in London. All that information we could port over to the Atmos panners, and we could just sort of pick up from there. So every pan had its 7/1 limitation, but every pan you could simply grab the object and keep going. You could make it go over there and then up there. It just was the next layer, basically, of panning programming. And that was frightening. We thought we had completely broken the panner idea by panning everything like crazy in the 7/1 version, and now we just could keep going. And the frightening concept, I hate to say this, but fortunately our director had to leave. So we had to stop. It was frightening. But it was really exciting. It was a very exciting process. And like we all basically said, we just want to be in the same room with the picture. The picture was so breathtaking. We just tried every day to be literally on the same page with the picture. And our director was a fantastic and very grateful and gracious host, and was able to guide us through the whole thing. But I think I learned that you could pan anything anywhere and probably get away with it. But I also learned that sometimes that wasn't that important. So,
Well, Marty, you've done this perhaps the longest. So, what have you learned in the?
I'm to blame for all this? Is that what it comes to?
What has surprised you over the years?
I mean, I was just thinking back in 1982, I did my first surround mix, and we went ahead and had the ability to get 10 dB of separation in the back, and everybody was drooling on themselves, going crazy. And in 91, I started to do all my TV shows in surround. I was the fourth show on TV to do it in surround, and on a weekly basis, and it just became the matter of fact. And I remember people going, you know, okay, you're doing surround, how much longer does that take? And everybody's worried that it's going to take you longer to do your process. And Then the next thing was 5.1 came out, and everybody's going, oh my God, this 5.1 is going to take longer than what we're used to. Who's going to pay for it and everything like that? And I think that's the one thing that I've learned as we go and we experience things. I mean, I know what Dennis gave me, and he should be embarrassed by it because it was the first surround mix, immersive mix he gave. But that's a joke, Dennis. But I think he's learned, and I think we've all learned what we can get away with and what we can try. And it's a learning experience. But it's become second nature that I can't see myself going back to something as simplistic as 5.1. It's while we do have to deliver down from an immersive mix, I think we're learning how those things work, how we can easily be creative and do it in with the time frame that we were allotted. And I think the idea of doing everything natively is the only way, ultimately, that we're going to sell producers and studios for it, to show them that we can give them something that's going to have them able to put people in the seats in the theater to get a different experience, yet at the same time not really cost them anymore. And I think that is the goal that I think we all are striving for, and that we have seen the changes. I mean, on Ender's Game, we were waiting there for you to do your output, and you were having to do outputs, and we were dealing with all these issues, and now it's second nature with the Neve and everything like that, and the ability to take these things and manipulate them. Now it's the norm, and we've kind of gotten over the hump. And I would love to see everybody who has a dub stage in this town apply that. And I think ultimately down the road, the next step is 4K TV with having immersive sound, and that we're all going to, in X amount of years, do it on every program we do. And what's exciting is we're early guys doing it on, but it's this, I'm getting the same enjoyment out of it as I did in '82 when we got 10 dB of separation. It's one of those things that's just, all of a sudden, immersive sound to me is like they've taken the sound leash that we have on us and and just thrown it away. We can be creative or stupid with it, but we can do something with it. And to me, that's what it's all about. This is a fun art, and it's just something that is, there's nothing better than listening to something that you've done in a big theater and just smiling and going, that's what I intended. And I think with all the formats out there, I mean, the two main formats, immersive sound is going to be the closest to what we as mixers and what studios and directors had intended, comparing it to everything that was beforehand, with matrixing, with compression, and all this other stuff. I think we can get clarity, we can get depth, and we can be creative. To me, that's what excites me.
Andy, the same. I mean, during Apes, what did you learn and surprise the most?
Well, it was, I mean, it as the others have said, it just opens the door to whatever you want to do. That's the thing. And I think that, I think for us to have these tools is fantastic. There's no question about it. And I think the key to this is we've got to get more and more theaters equipped out in the world, because I think you've got to get the public behind this in some way. You know, when 3D exploded a few years back now, there was a rush of films that were converted into 3D quickly and very poorly received, rightly so, because they didn't look good. And I think it turned people off of that experience. And I think that what my hope is with the immersive sound is that we can provide something that turns people onto it, and they can become the advertisement for going to see that movie in that format. Clearly, as a mixer, it doesn't matter to me if it's a big dynamic film or a small film with a couple of people talking in a room. To mix it in an immersive sound format is always going to sound better. I don't know that the public are going to perceive a small film mixed that way initially as something special to go and see. So I think this is why I said earlier that I thought Gravity was such a gift, because it was something that people were talking about and remarking about as a major sort of technical accomplishment, and it just happened to have this immersive sound format in it at the time, which was perfect timing for that movie. So I think you know, my hope is that we can deliver stuff and the films are made that we can give a great soundtrack to, that people will talk about and want to go and see, and that will require movie theaters to start equipping this as quickly as possible, because that's got to be our aim. Because right now, when I mixed Apes, I know that I'm mixing for 2% or 1% of the population, if that. So this is why we had to pay so much attention to the regular formats, because that's what everyone's going to see. I want it to get to like 50%, where then we can really feel now we can devote our time to this format, or because we're now starting to see a big audience. So that's my hope, because I think it's worth it, and I really hope it takes off that way.
It's dawning on me that we should be recognizing, just as a group, the fearlessness and the playfulness that you are all embracing this new way of approaching it, as opposed to a resistance. It's pioneer work in its most basic form, and if we heard this conversation 15 years from now, we would be stunned about how prescient it is about what's going to be the general thing. I think you all have been, as individuals and as a group, moving the ball way forward in ways that the technology is a hammer and a nail, but you're not stuck there. You're turning it into how people are experiencing films. And I'm very glad to hear that this is how it's being approached in the community. Thank you for all of you. Great.
So I'd just like to say, first of all, I'm appreciative of all you folks being here, have an interest in this, in what we're doing. Hopefully you will as well be doing it, mixing and working in this environment shortly, if you're not already doing it. Honestly, I would love for us to be doing this and sitting and discussing this in front of a room full of producers and directors who I think need to hear what we have to say, honestly, on this subject. They need to get excited about this. They need to embrace it. They need to incorporate this format creatively into their product. Additionally, I would like to see the general public become aware of it. I've talked to friends, people, they don't even know what I'm talking about if I say Atmos or immersive sound or whatever, it's like they don't know what it is. And I always point to the brilliant marketing of THX, which I think, people, the average person in the street didn't know what the heck THX was, but they wanted it. They went to the theater. What theater do you have THX in your? No. Oh, I'm going to go somewhere else then. They didn't know what it was, but they knew that it meant better sound, and they loved that logo, that great logo. It was brilliant. This immersive sound, whichever format, needs something like that. We need marketing. It needs to be, people need to experience it. It sells itself. For those of us we've heard it. Like I said, I had the experience, and it was, people hear it and they'll get it right away. But there's a stunning amount of directors and producers who've never heard it. They don't know what it is. They're ignorant of it, and so. Hopefully over time that will happen, where, that would be my, what have I learned? That's one thing I've learned. Even within our industry, there's not enough knowledge base.
It was interesting. When I first started writing about film sound, and it was right when I first started talking to a couple of you, you'd spend 2 days on the 5.1. Right, and I remember the very first movie I did was in cinema digital sound with the Doors, and you'd mix, and then you'd do 2 days in the 5.1. That changed in about 6 months. It just converted completely over. Is this a bigger leap? I mean, because we were so familiar with sort of surround. Is this a
it's a more expensive leap.
It's a more expensive.
That's for sure.
Yeah,
It's a higher fidelity leap.
Higher
Much
fidelity
higher
leap?
fidelity.
Well, I remember when I first started out, I was mixing mono, live to mono. Everything was just mono back in mag days. Then there was Dolby Stereo, which was fantastic because it introduced really full range. We no longer had to even think about that horrible Academy roll-off thing, which was awful, especially for music. So it was better, but it was a real challenge because it sort of worked and sort of, not so great again for music. It was a struggle. But because the fidelity was so great, we loved it, but it was a challenge for us. Then digital, that was great. We had now, it was, the channels were reliable. If we put something in the, front left, it actually stayed in the front left, which wasn't always the case with, the Matrix digital, the Matrix 4-channel audio. But it was good, it was better, and I appreciated it, but there's nothing, this immersive sound thing is a whole other experience, as I've said. So exciting, the potential, the ability for every discipline that we're all involved in. It's just a massive leap, I feel.
We are opening up for questions, though, so please, you have some real talent up here on this stage. So, okay, thanks.
Thanks. I've really enjoyed the opportunities, say, in the last 10 years as a field recordist with a passion for atmosphere and ambience and capturing a coherent surround image. I get to, now that we've got more than 2 channels to record on our field recorders as well, and I also get a little more time than maybe you, Mark, get to have in production. That's a great luxury for you to be able to hang a DPA 5.
Let me disabuse you of that notion. there's no sudden, expansion of the capacity to have time on the set and do production. The key piece is that it's invisible to that it's not invading the known process, because it would stop in a heartbeat if it was holding up production. So I say that with affection, but.
Yeah. But sometimes if there's enough,
it's got to be. It has to integrate in a comfortable way in that realm.
Yeah. Now, what I was wondering for you guys mixing, when we had 4 channels, like when the Diva recorder came out, I started recording like stereo front, stereo rear of a atmosphere, so you could have this sort of coherent image in the theater. Now, like the DPA microphone has that center channel, and I've also been recording it in discrete Oro format, 11 channels, 5 channels here, upper level, 5 channels, and an overhead. What do you guys think of the center channel, getting back to the center channel, when you've got ambience and it's coherent from in the recording? How do you like having that, in the dialogue channel? Is it useful for smoothing out dialogue? Does it get in the way sometimes? Do you get to experiment with that at all? Or?
I'll just say one thing from my experience, which is that if there's any phase relationship that's in an original recording that's going to be used in terms of atmosphere that's attached to that dialogue, it's going to get destroyed, because the dialogue itself is never going to stay in a phase coherent pattern with the rest of the tracks. It's going to be manipulated, moved around. It's going to break apart. So it's essentially, from a dialogue point of view, you're better off with panned mono than you are trying to take any form of stereo signal, if you like. It's just my experience. I don't know if Ron has a different opinion, but it's a dangerous tool because you have to keep it attached. I did a film quite a few years ago called Cloverfield, where there was a lot of stereo dialogue work, and I would end up having to lay all the dialogue tracks down in one pass. I could never do any individual work within single tracks. In terms of re-recording, I had to keep everything in its phase relationship throughout the whole reel and record it. It worked, but it was cumbersome to do for that reason.
Yeah, and actually in my situation, I'm working in post, not recording dialogue in that format, but recording ambiences after the fact. And just wondering, then you've got your mono dialogue track done in a traditional way, and how they integrate. When my atmospheres come into the center channel, do you ditch it, take it out of the center channel, or is it useful in the mix?
Oh, I think it's useful. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely useful, and it's a case-by-case basis, though, of course, because some sets, and I'm sure Mark will say that there's very noisy, and he's having trouble trying to... Never, no one ever gets that, right? But
Noisy sets? No.
Not for Mark.
No. And it's difficult because he's struggling with trying to get a good track down. I'm trying to get it clear, and then you add that, and then we got to take it out. But there's plenty of other times where we're given great tracks, there's a lot of room, and that can be very useful and fill things out. So it's really case by case. But it's nice to have the option, I'll tell you that.
Got one over here?
Skip, when I heard Gravity in Atmos, if I'm not mistaken, there are times when you have the musical score even panning into the surrounds and everything.
Yes.
I was wondering how you dealt with that then when you had to downmix that to a more compromised surround format.
Well, yes, all of the music was moving. There was hardly a thing that was allowed to stay still. The score was delivered to the stage in 5/1 stems, the way mini scores are delivered, and we had the double assignment to not let the music seem like an orchestra score because of the director's. He didn't want the movie to be like a National Geographic, we're in the space station now thing. He wanted it to be a dramatic component. And we used the score in lieu of sound effects. So we sort of stepped off and we let the score be as wild as we could possibly make it. And the director forced that on every single cue. He made us work as hard as we could to make the score connect with stuff and move and help the motion of the image be transferred to the energy of the soundtrack as well. And subsequently, since we were mixing virtually, we could always tailor that panning so it worked with each of the down mixes as we went all the way down to, I don't think we made a mono, but we made a stereo.
Anybody else? Up here? Can you get it?
I guess my question would be your approach using reverbs in an immersive sound format, whether you be a bit more aggressive with that, putting multiple reverbs to fill up the separate channels, or do you take one reverb and pan it around? Just kind of your approach using verb on dialogue.
Can I answer that? I use mostly plugins for my reverbs, and Exponential Audio just came out with a 3D plugin which allows us to do an 11:1 reverbs, and I find that that at times really works well on certain things, not everything. So that's just another tool in the tool chest to pull from and utilize. I think that as immersive sound gets more prominent, I think that people who create reverbs are going to have to take that in consideration. Then again, it's the fact that we use lots of mono items, sources, and then treat them in maybe stereo or delays. It's a combination of multiple things. But for example, right now, Exponential Audio has a 11.1 that can be either used in Oro and or Atmos to, give you certain, shall we say, treatments that would make it a little bit cumbersome and time-consuming to get, but you can get it right off the shelf. As for the other guys, I'll let them.
I use various reverbs, and definitely I use separate reverbs going back. So sometimes I'll use a tighter one up front and longer as it goes, or depending on how you want to get the right effect, for that particular sound. Using separate ones gives you even more separation and a little more depth, and you can really play with it. If you pan, let's say you have a mono source and a stereo reverb, and then you pan it back, it becomes a little bit more mono if you really think about it, because it's It's now not as separate, it's just filling up more space. And the way we hear things being binaural like that, I noticed that if we put anything in the center, like in the overhead, it just made things more mono, and you had to be careful, like, wow, I really liked it when it was wide. So you have to watch out for that, like where it gets panned, how it gets panned. Certainly I pan a lot of stereo reverbs, so it's not like I don't do that, but I tend to have a separate one in the back with a little more delay, giving it more depth, things like that.
We have time for one last question, so let's fire away.
As mixers, artists, all of you, amazing people, this guy was mentioning field recording for sound effects, ambience, things like that. We have people who are recording, you know, on the scoring stage for symphony, and you were saying putting mics overhead even on the scoring stage. I guess all the above question is, as the artist, what would you guys like to see, even in the early stages of Atmos and Aura, as far as sound and music, the way it's recorded goes? Have you been on the stage mixing and said, man, I wish they would have recorded, you know, the music this way or the sound effects this way, having the ability to do what you can do now? Are you seeing any glimpse of different methods as far as field recording and music recording goes? Thank you.
I'd say Dennis is one of the forerunners of that, having his room be Atmos when he's mixing is a big leap forward, and he's one of the first people to do that I know of. And we've talked a lot about that. We tried to do it on one show, but we didn't have the time, and it was brand new, so we're definitely going to be doing that in the future. But we talked a lot about it, and I think it's great that, because he has all the separation, he's the guy miking it, he can really choose how he's going to lay that out. And we've talked a lot about, you know, the advantages of it, what works, what doesn't work. So as far as music recording goes, it's really changing the game, and that's very exciting. Sound effects, you know, like Eric over here is talking about. You know, he started with, you know, stereo stuff, just left and right. Now he's doing 4-channel, but now he's even going 5.1 or even Oro, it's just expanding. Every time we get new gear and can push that envelope, we do it because we love to see the effect and where it takes our craft. Gives us more latitude to do things that we've never done. So it's exciting to see it just keep moving forward, and we just keep pushing it every time we can. We're like kids in a candy store.
Just, you know, discuss a little bit about recording, especially for orchestral recording, for, you know, in any immersive format. I've tried lots of different miking, you know, techniques, trying things, adding mics, especially, you know, overhead mics and all above orchestra. I worked on a show, Godzilla, which was out recently. It was just a massive orchestra, and I think maybe the biggest I've ever recorded. I think we had something like 115 musicians. It was huge, actually here at Sony. And so I tried some other miking just because I knew it was going to be released in Atmos and blah, blah, blah. And honestly, the overhead mics didn't work well. It actually tended to make the orchestra sound smaller, if you can imagine that. I couldn't explain exactly why, other than when I put it into the stereo bed overhead, which means all the left overhead monitors are going, all the right. It didn't work. And I, unfortunately, you know, being the realities of our job, I didn't have the time to really experiment a great deal with it. I have some other thoughts about that. In other words, what I would do instead of that is maybe put it into an object so I could minimize the size of what those mics were, you know, the amount of sound those mics were putting out. In other words, how many monitors it was playing. I think that might work better. You know, it's a matter of experimenting with it. As I think we've all said, we're learning how to do this. I remember, and I think quite often about the early days of stereo, and I would, you know, I actually built a stereo with a friend of mine. I was a kid, and aside from almost killing each other, electrocuting, we actually did it. But there was nothing to play except these sort of demonstration records. There was no real stereo product. And eventually they started to release some music. And it was really, you know, kind of like when I was starting out with immersive sound. It was stupid. You'd have the drums on one side, the bass on the other side, and maybe whatever, some lead instrument in the middle. And it just sounded lame. Because they didn't know, nobody knew how to use this technology yet. Obviously, it's evolved beautifully. We're sort of in that early mode, and I am. I'll speak for myself. So I'm, you know, we're learning how to use it. It's such a great technology, and you have so much ability. We're figuring it out, and there's great things to do. There's great miking things that will evolve, that we'll find. I haven't discovered all the really, really cool stuff yet, but I'm going to someday. I will someday. But, you know, it's just a matter of how do we fine tune? Where do those mics go? What's the cool spot in this big space? Is it a combination of microphone? You know, it's going to take a little bit of time for us to discover how to do that. We just have to have an open mind and want to find this, you know, want to promote this technology, want it to be meaningful, want it to be cool.
All right. With that, it's very interesting. This was usually a lot of the, you know, the jet buys and the ricochets and everything get a lot of attention in the surround formats, the immersive. These guys run the mix, and I'm really glad we had this panel today. It's just not just having a pick. So thank you, Mark, Marty, Andy, Ron, Dennis, and Skip for helping out. Thank you very much.